They buried him alive in the desert, thinking he'd never crawl back. But his old K9 found the grave, and now man and dog are hunting the ones who called themselves brothers. They didn't say a word, just took my phone, my keys, and nodded like we were about to have a smoke break. I should have known better. You spend 13 years in a club like that, you learn how silence can be louder than gunfire, but loyalty blinds you, makes you think brotherhood means protection. What it really means is leverage. The bag went over my head smooth, like they'd practiced it. I didn't fight. What's the point? When 5 men move like one, you're already dead. They shoved me into the back of a truck that smelled like oil and blood. I didn't ask where we were going. I already knew. It was the place they took rats and problems. Dry Creek Flats. Sand so dry it swallows tire tracks before the dust even settles. We drove for what felt like an hour. Then it stopped. They yanked me out. No talking, not even breathing heavy. They'd done this before. Boots on gravel. The faint creak of a shovel being pulled from a bag. That sound hit me harder than any punch I'd ever taken. I tried to breathe through the canvas, but panic makes the air thick. My knees hit the ground. They didn't tie me up like in the movies. They just pushed me down and started digging. Casual. Like they were planting a tree. I wanted to scream, but I wouldn't give them that. I wanted to say, I was one of you. But they already knew that. That's why they were doing it this way. Quiet. No mess. No gunshot to explain later. Just gone. The hole was shallow, but wide. I felt the earth shift beneath me as I was rolled in. One of them, probably Colt, the one I used to call brother, pressed a hand against my chest and held me down. I heard sand sliding from the shovel, landing in bursts. It hit my boots first, then my legs, then my chest. Each layer got heavier. The weight of betrayal is like that. Silent, grain by grain, until it crushes your lungs and makes you forget who you ever were. The last thing I felt was a hand on my shoulder. Not rough, almost sorry. And then the earth closed. No words, no prayers, no patch. They thought it was over. That they'd buried their problem deep enough for the sun to bleach clean. But the mistake they made wasn't the grave. It was forgetting the dog. Because what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that I wasn't the only one who remembered where we used to ride. And somewhere, out there, there were paws pounding dirt faster than any engine could outrun. The desert was still. No sound but the hiss of wind dragging over cracked ground and buried regret. Beneath the sand, the weight pressed down like concrete. Breathing turned into a memory. The air I did find came in whispers. My thoughts blurred into nothing, until even pain faded. But 50 miles away, something stirred. Nero lay beneath a rusted trailer outside an old junkyard, the kind of place no one looked twice at. His ears twitched. His eyes opened yellow and sharp like headlights cutting through smoke. He didn't bark. He didn't move at first. He just listened. There was no sound to follow, no scent. But something in his bones pulled tight. The world shifted. A memory triggered not by sound, but by silence. And that silence screamed one thing: gone. He stood slowly, stretching the stiffness from his joints. The scar down his right side still pulled when he turned too fast, but he ignored it. Pain was background noise now. His nose twitched once, twice. Then he moved. Not fast, not yet. Measured, purposeful, like something ancient had woken up again. He passed the rusted truck he used to sleep under. The food bowl, still half full, untouched. Behind him, the world continued like nothing had changed. But in his head, the clock had started ticking. The last time I saw Nero, I had just walked away from a fight. Not in a bar, not with fists, but with ghosts. We'd come home from a place that didn't have a name. Dust, fire, orders barked through radios we didn't trust. Nero had been a military K9, trained to sniff out bombs, read tension, and end lives when the leash snapped. But they'd written him off after the last mission, called him unstable, unpredictable, dangerous. I called him mine. He didn't trust me at first, didn't trust anyone. Just circled the walls of the kennel like he was waiting to be sent back into hell. It took weeks. I sat outside the gate every morning with a cup of coffee and my silence. I didn't try to coax him, I just showed up. One day he walked up, nose pressed against the wire. We didn't shake hands or play fetch. I just looked at him and said, "You're not broken. Neither am I." From that day on, we were one. Now, years later, something inside him snapped awake again. That bond, the one they said dogs forget after a while, it tightened like a leash being tugged from across miles. He picked up speed, first a trot, then a full sprint. And if anyone had been standing in his way, they'd have seen it in his eyes. The calm before war. Because Nero didn't know where I was, but he knew I wasn't okay. The world was closing in. Every breath I took felt like pulling glass through a straw. My body was trying to shut down, conserve what little life I had left, but my mind wouldn't quit. It kept flashing to strange things. Broken tail lights, the smell of motor oil, the sound of laughter that didn't belong to me anymore. I didn't know if I was dreaming or dying. Maybe both. Then the sand shifted. At first, I thought it was my lungs giving out. Hallucinations. My brain gasping for meaning before the dark swallowed it all. But then came the sound, faint, frantic, rhythmic, like the desert itself was breathing. Then weight, not heavy, focused. A paw. Something scraped across my chest. Then again, higher this time, toward my face. Nails clawed into the dirt above me. Sand poured into my mouth, my eyes, my ears. I coughed, or tried to, but it came out like a spasm. My body jerked on instinct, trying to rise, but I couldn't. I was buried too deep, until he found me. A sharp snout pressed against my cheek, wet breath, hot and alive. And then a sound I hadn't heard in years. A low, guttural growl, not a threat, a warning to the world. Nero. His claws worked like shovels, tearing into the sand with the urgency of a life he refused to lose. I could hear his panting, fast and desperate. I could feel the vibration of his body slamming into the dirt. He wasn't just digging, he was fighting death for me. Light cracked through the sand above me. A beam hit my face. I squinted against it, barely able to lift my head. But I saw him, eyes locked on mine, half crazed and fully focused. Blood marked one of his paws, either his or someone else's. Didn't matter. What mattered was, he was here. He grabbed the collar of my jacket with his teeth and pulled. I screamed inside my chest. The pain was unreal. Every nerve felt like it had been on fire for hours. But I moved. Just an inch. Just enough. And that inch meant everything. With a final snarl and a thrust of his body, Nero dragged me through the last layer of sand. I erupted into the open air like a corpse clawing its way out of a nightmare, gasping, gagging, crying without tears. I lay there, motionless, staring up at the fading orange sky. Nero sat beside me, his chest heaving, his eyes never leaving mine. We didn't need words. He knew. I knew. The bond between us wasn't just loyalty. It was survival. My limbs wouldn't respond. My voice was gone. But my mind was on fire. They thought I was done. That I'd never see the sun again. But I was breathing. And that meant only one thing now. Somebody had to pay. The sun was gone by the time I moved. My fingers twitched first. Then came the ache in my ribs, the fire in my throat, the cold realization that I wasn't dead. Not yet. Nero stood over me like a shadow, refusing to leave my side, even as the coyotes started howling in the distance. I couldn't speak, but I managed to roll. Every movement lit a fuse in my nerves, but I welcomed it. Pain meant I was still here. I pointed. South. Nero understood. He always did. We crawled together, one dragging, one guarding, until we found it. The old barn stood like a skeleton against the moonlight. I hadn't seen it in a decade, but it hadn't changed. Rusted tin roof, broken door, the smell of dust and age. Back when I was still running packages for the club, this was one of the fallback spots. No one came here unless they were hiding. I was doing just that, only this time from the people I once called brothers. Nero helped me inside. He nudged open the door with his snout, walked 3 paces in, then doubled back to help me over the threshold. I collapsed on the dirt floor and felt the splinters of time sink into my spine. We didn't light a fire. No lights, no noise, just breathing. The first hour I didn't think. I just existed. Every bone begged to shut down. But sleep was dangerous. Pain kept me awake, and I let it. Let it crawl through my skin and remind me what they did, the way they moved in silence, the way no one hesitated. I replayed it over and over again until the rage started to rise. But I stopped it. Rage was the first mistake. That's what they'd expect. A wild man coming for revenge, screaming, breaking doors down. That wasn't who I was anymore. I didn't want vengeance. I wanted answers. And then I wanted the ground to remember their names like it remembered mine. I dragged myself to the corner where I found an old crate, the kind we used to store ammo and patches in. It was empty except for a faded map, a rusted knife, and a lighter with the club's symbol on it. The irony hit hard. The lighter still worked. I turned it over in my palm and saw the engraving, "Ride or Die." I lit it once, just to see the flame, then closed it. Nero lay down beside me, head on his paws, eyes never closing. He could sense it. Something had changed. I wasn't broken. I was sharpening. The desert tried to take me. My brothers tried to bury me. But now the fire was back, not in my throat or chest, but in my veins. And fire burns clean. The clubhouse looked different now. Same cracked walls, same oil-stained floors, same bar that stank of whiskey and betrayal, but something in the air had changed. Louder, meaner. The music thumped harder. The laughs were emptier. It didn't feel like a brotherhood anymore. It felt like a gang on the edge of its leash. Reese sat where no one else dared to sit. The head chair, once reserved for Old Man Cutter, the founder. But Cutter was long gone, pushed out in silence. No one spoke his name anymore. And now Reese had the gavel, the crown, and the arrogance of someone who thought fire made him immortal. He was young. That was part of the problem. Too young to remember the codes that built the club. Too drunk on power to care. He didn't earn his seat. He took it. First with charm, then with pressure, and finally with force. The kind that made men disappear. The kind that made people stop asking questions. He leaned forward now, elbows on the table, voice low and smooth like poison in water. "Brothers," he said, looking around at the patched faces. Most of them were new. Recruits who didn't know the weight of the ink on their backs. We're in a new era. The old way, loyalty, that's what got us stuck. That's what got us weak. Now we move fast, move hard. No second chances, not for rats, not for ghosts. A few nodded, a few looked down. Reese stood up and let the silence stretch until it broke under his heel. "Some of you are wondering why we had to do what we did with Eli," he said. "My name. spoken like it was a cough he needed to spit out. He lit a cigarette and took a long drag. Then, through the smoke, he was going to talk. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but he was a crack in the wall, and cracks become leaks, and leaks flood empires. He exhaled, let the smoke fill the room. "We didn't kill a brother," he said, walking slowly around the table. "We removed a threat for the club." No one cheered, not yet, but no one objected either. That was the new loyalty, compliance through fear. You didn't follow because you believed. You followed because the alternative was a grave in the flats. Reese smiled. "We ride in the open now. No shadows. We take what's ours. And anyone who still clings to the past." He stopped behind one of the older members, Tank. The man's hands were clenched, jaw locked. Reese placed a hand on his shoulder like a priest delivering last rites. "We'll be riding into the sun alone." The meeting ended with shallow applause. Outside, the engines fired like thunder. But somewhere deep down, even Reese knew what he was ignoring. They never found the body, and bodies that disappear in silence sometimes come back with noise. The first whisper came from a gas station outside Baker. A prospect swore he saw someone limping past the pumps late at night, covered in dust, with a black dog trailing him like a shadow. He laughed it off the next morning, called it a hallucination, a heat mirage, a ghost story. But the seed had already been planted, and seeds in this club didn't take long to grow roots. By the end of the week, 3 different members had seen something. A figure near the canyon ridge, watching, a man in a hooded jacket leaning against a road sign outside the clubhouse, gone by the time they turned around. One swore someone knocked on his door and left a single matchstick on the welcome mat. Just one. No note, no explanation, just the sound of paws padding away into the night. Reese brushed it off, of course. Said people were getting soft. Said ghosts don't walk and dead men don't knock. But even he stopped smiling when Tank didn't show up to morning roll. Tank had been old school. One of the last who actually remembered when the club was built on loyalty, not fear. He was quiet, consistent, dependable. The kind of man who never missed a ride, never missed a call. And just like that, he was gone. No call, no body, just silence. They found his bike 3 days later, tipped over on the side of Route 19, keys still in the ignition, helmet strapped to the handlebars. No blood, no signs of struggle, just one thing taped to the seat, a club patch, burned along the edges. Panic doesn't spread loud in a place like this. It creeps. Men who used to swagger now checked over their shoulders. Doors that used to stay unlocked were bolted shut. Guns stayed loaded. Every dog bark made hearts skip. It wasn't just fear of death. It was the idea that maybe they hadn't finished the job, that maybe the desert had spit something back out. Reese called another meeting, this time with fists on the table and a snarl in his voice. "If anyone's playing games," he growled, "they better hope I find them before whatever's out there does." But deep in his eyes, just for a second, you could see it. Doubt. Because the man they buried never screamed, never begged. And the dog they forgot? He never forgot anything. Out there, in the dark, the wind carried something new. It wasn't just dust anymore, it was footsteps, echoes, something watching. And for the first time in a long while, the club started riding with one eye on the road and the other on the rearview mirror. The nights were colder now. Not because the desert changed, but because I had. The kind of cold that comes when something inside you locks into place. Not hate, not rage, precision. That quiet, surgical focus born from betrayal. I didn't want revenge. I wanted balance. They tipped the scale, and now I was going to reset it, grain by grain. So I made the list. Not all of them, Just the ones who held the shovels, the ones who looked me in the eye before the bag went over my head. I remembered their hands, their boots, the weight of their silence. I wrote their names on an old sheet of plywood in the barn. The ink bled, the wood cracked, but it didn't matter. This wasn't about trophies. It was a countdown. Colt, Denny, Lark, Spider, and Reese. I didn't need to rush. They weren't going anywhere. Nero lay beside me as I mapped their routines. He didn't bark, didn't whine, just watched. When I pointed at a picture, his ears twitched. When I mentioned a name, his tail would either lie flat or give a flick. He remembered them too. Dogs don't forget faces that mean danger. Denny was first. He worked nights at a scrapyard in Dry Hollow. Same route, same habits. Smoked the same menthols every break. He had a bad knee, an old wreck from a chase back in '09, always parked in the far corner by the busted fence where the security camera blinked dead. Weak spot. Lark ran the garage now. Spent most of his day under hoods barking at rookies. Lived alone above the shop, kept a sawed-off by the door but forgot to lock the back staircase. Every Tuesday, he went to pick up parts from the same depot and always took the alley. Spider? He was a drunk and loud, the kind that leaves breadcrumbs without even knowing it. He hit the same bar every Friday, bragged about the club like it was still the army of gods it used to be. He was sloppy, an easy pull. Colt was trickier, smarter. He kept his head low after Tank vanished, used burner phones, moved between motels, and never rode the same bike twice. But he couldn't erase his scent, not from Nero. Dogs like him didn't just track, they hunted, and Nero was no pet. He was a weapon they'd forgotten how to fear. I studied their faces like a sniper scopes a target, long, patient, detached, not to hate them, just to understand them. Because once you understand someone's rhythm, you don't need force, just timing. And time was something I had plenty of now. Every mark on the map brought me closer to the center, closer to the one who gave the order. Reese thought burying me would make me vanish, but you don't bury a man like me without planting something first. And I was growing. Denny was always the easiest, predictable to a fault. He didn't believe in change, kept the same routine, same truck, same sandwich, in a greasy paper bag every night at 10 o'clock, like his life was stuck on replay. He thought consistency made him safe. That's the kind of man who never sees the moment coming. He parked at the far edge of the scrapyard like always, just out of view from the half-dead floodlight that buzzed like a dying fly. The camera on the corner hadn't worked in years. I knew because I'd installed it myself, back when things still meant something. I watched from behind the stacked sheet metal. Nero crouched beside me, still as stone. No bark, no sound. Just breath. Denny stepped out, stretched his back, lit a cigarette, and popped the hood on the yard's junker tow truck. He hummed some old tune he probably hadn't thought about since high school. I waited. 1 minute. 2. Timing matters more than strength. I moved fast, one hand over his mouth, the other pulling him back against the cold steel of the frame. He didn't struggle long, just enough to feel his own weakness. Then I whispered, "Miss me?" He froze. I didn't have to show my face. I didn't have to say my name, just those 2 words, and his body turned to ice. I let him go. He stumbled, spun around, eyes wide, mouth open, but no sound came out. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, which, in a way, he had. He backed away, fumbling for the knife on his hip. I didn't move. Nero stepped out into the glow of the half-light. Denny's hand stopped midair. The moment he saw the dog, he knew. Nero wasn't just a shadow in a nightmare. He was the nightmare. "You gonna stab a dog now, Denny?" I asked, calm as the desert wind. He dropped the knife. I thought you were dead," I said, stepping forward. "You did a lousy job." He tried to speak again, but I raised a hand. "I'm not here to kill you," I said. I just want you to deliver something. He nodded frantically. I leaned in, close enough to smell the fear rolling off his skin. Tell Reese, I'm breathing. I walked away, left him standing there, shaking, as Nero followed me into the shadows. We didn't look back. He didn't sleep that night. None of them did. By sunrise, the message had made it to Reese. 3 words carried on the tongue of a broken man who couldn't stop shaking long enough to light a cigarette. I'm breathing. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was a warning. Because the dead don't talk. But I did. And I had a lot more to say. The barn creaked in the wind like it remembered me, like it had been waiting for this night. The same boards, the same dirt floor, but now it felt different. Not like a hiding place, like a place where something had to end. The fire in the barrel cracked quietly, controlled, contained. I stared at the flame while Nero lay in the shadows behind me, eyes half open, but fully aware. He always watched when it mattered. I took the patch out slowly. It had been folded up in a tin box, wrapped in an old shirt that still smelled like sweat, gas, and years I couldn't get back. The thread was faded now. The symbol, an iron skull with twin pistons behind it, once meant something. Brotherhood, loyalty, a place to belong. But that was before it became a badge for cowards. I held it in my hands for a long time, thought about the man who handed it to me. Cutter. He was rough, but he had rules. He believed in structure, in order. He'd never have buried me out there. Never. Then I thought about Reese and how he twisted it all. How he turned the club from code into chaos. The patch didn't belong to me anymore. It didn't belong to anyone. Not like this. Behind me, a footstep. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. The man walked like memory, heavy, deliberate, and worn out from too many miles. Colt. He stood beside me in silence, hands in his pockets, eyes locked on the patch. We hadn't spoken since the night they tried to bury me, but we didn't need to say much. Didn't think I'd see you again, he said. You didn't. He looked down at the flame, then at the patch in my hands. You sure? He asked. I nodded, not because I was letting go, but because holding on to it meant I was still one of them. I dropped the patch into the fire. It curled fast, like it was eager to vanish. The black threads popped and sparked, the symbol twisting in on itself. For a moment, the skull looked like it was screaming. Then it was gone. Colt didn't say anything else, just stood there until the last thread disappeared into smoke. Then he pulled something from his jacket, a single piece of cloth, new, blank. He handed it to me. No symbol, he said. Not yet. Just something real, if that's what you're building. I took it, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about something new, not a club, not a name. Justice, without banners, and a war, without flags. The trap was lazy, sloppy. Reese must have thought I was still crawling through sand, desperate and broken, but desperation sharpens you. And Nero? Nero smelled the setup before I even saw the glint of the bait. It was midnight when I got the message. Burner phone, no name, just coordinates, and 2 words. Let's talk. I knew the spot. An old truck stop off I-14, abandoned after the fire. The roof half collapsed, glass long shattered, fuel pumps gutted. A place where echoes went to die. Perfect place to disappear someone who had already vanished once. I went anyway, not because I was naive, but because I knew they wanted me cornered, and I had no problem walking into a corner if I built the walls myself. We approached slow. Nero led the way, ears forward, steps light. His nose twitched, then froze. He stopped dead. A low growl rumbled in his chest, not loud, but deep, like a warning sent through bone. Two of them, Lark and Spider. I caught their scent before I saw them, not with my nose, through rhythm. Silence is a language, and theirs was panicked. Quick breaths, metal clicks. They were close, one behind the busted diner counter, the other crouched near the back exit. I smiled. We circled. Nero disappeared into the dark like a shadow with teeth. I moved through the side entrance, glass crunching beneath my boots just enough to let them hear me. Just enough to let them think they had the drop. They moved exactly when I needed them to. Lark lunged from behind the counter, gun half raised, finger tense. But he never saw Nero. The dog came from the blind side, full force into his legs, teeth locked around his ankle. Lark screamed and hit the floor so hard it knocked the wind from his lungs. Spider panicked, fired too fast, missed. I was already on him, hand on his wrist, slamming it into the wall until the gun dropped and the panic rose higher than the barrel ever did. We didn't kill them. That wasn't the point. We left them there, bleeding, broken, humiliated. I took their vests, ripped the patches clean off, and carved one word into the hood of their bike with the knife Reese gave me all those years ago. Traitor. By dawn, the story was already spreading. Two patched men, ambushed, disarmed, and left breathing. That was the real message. Anyone can kill. It takes control to let them live just long enough to speak your name. Reese didn't take it well. He started pacing more, started locking the doors to rooms that used to stay open. He carried 2 guns now instead of 1, and he slept with his boots on. The club was cracking. Trust vanished. Whispers grew louder. Every member wondered if the man beside him had already made a deal. Or worse, if he'd be next. Because if I could get to them out there, what stopped me from walking straight through the front door? The night I walked back into the den, I didn't come for blood. I came for silence. The kind that slips in under locked doors and curls around the throat before anyone knows they're choking. The clubhouse sat heavy against the desert like a sleeping beast. Lights on, music low, 4 bikes out front, fewer than usual. Reese was paranoid now, keeping circles small, moves tighter. But even fear makes you predictable. I waited until the generator sputtered, like it always did around midnight when the fuel ran low. Power cut for just 10 seconds. That's all I needed. I slipped in through the service entrance, the one that led past the old tool shed and into the kitchen. Nero stayed behind, watching. He wouldn't enter unless I needed him. That was our rule. The last resort wore fur. The hallway was dim. The stench of beer and sweat still clung to the wood panels like ghosts. I moved fast, silent, each step a memory. My patch had once hung on that wall, now replaced with Reese's new motto, "Fear keeps the chain tight." I found him in the back, not Reese, Duke, the last one from the dig site who hadn't spoken since Denny cracked. He sat alone, head down, polishing a shotgun he'd probably never get to fire. I didn't turn on the light, just stood in the doorway. He didn't hear me at first, until the mask I wore let out a breath I couldn't hold back. He looked up, froze. The room went still, like time itself forgot to tick. He reached for the gun. I stepped forward. "Don't," I whispered. He froze again, hand hovering. "You left me to die, Duke." His eyes widened. He hadn't heard that voice since the grave. And now it came from the shadows, stitched with smoke and memory. "I didn't know," he stammered. "You knew enough," I said. "You held the shovel." He dropped the gun. I stepped close enough for him to see my face beneath the mask, just a glimpse, enough to wake his guilt and drown it in silence. "I'm not here for you," I said. "Not yet." Why not? Because living with it is worse. I placed something on the table, a matchbook from the bar where they used to gather. One single match missing. The message was clear. I left him shaking. No blood, no screams, just a ghost that walked through the door, whispered the truth, and vanished into the dark again. Behind me, the clubhouse breathed like a dying animal, and somewhere in that air, guilt began to rot. Because you can survive a gunshot, but not the echo of your own cowardice. Colt was the last one I hadn't made a decision about, not because he was innocent, but because the betrayal hurt differently. He wasn't just another patch. He was the one who taught me how to ride with control, how to read the wind before a storm hit, how to hold your weight in a turn without losing the line. He called me kid long after I stopped being one. And I never corrected him. Because back then, I needed a brother. He played the part well. The night they buried me, he didn't swing a shovel. He didn't throw the dirt. But he was there, standing in the back, arms crossed, eyes hard. He didn't say no. He didn't stop them. He just watched. And that kind of silence has a weight all its own. I found him at the old track on the edge of town, the one we used to race at when the club was still a family, before Reese turned it into a machine of noise and fear. Colt sat on the bleachers, beer in one hand, the other resting on his knee like he was waiting for someone to finally show. He didn't flinch when I sat beside him. "Figured you'd find me," he said without looking. "Figured you'd still be running," I replied. He took a drink. I did, for a while. Then I got tired of the sound my own silence made. The night stretched out in front of us like the empty desert, cold, endless, unforgiving. "I didn't dig," he said. "Didn't stop them either." "I know. I thought, if I said something, they'd turn on me too. And I told myself you were already gone, that there was nothing to stop. And did you believe that?" He looked at me now, not like a friend, not like an enemy, just a man holding his own cowardice like a weight in his chest. "No," he said, "I didn't." We sat in the dark, two ghosts, one betrayed, one broken. "I'm not here for payback," I told him. "That part of me's already dead. I'm here to find out if there's anything left worth saving." He reached into his jacket and pulled out something small, my old dog tag. Burnt, scratched, but still readable. He'd kept it, all this time. "I should have burned this," he said, "but I didn't, because deep down I knew you weren't done." I took it without a word. "I want in," he said. "Not back into your trust, just into whatever comes next." I stared at him for a long time. "Then prove it," I said. And with that, the line between enemy and ally blurred. Not erased, just rewritten. Because some loyalties die, and others, if bled long enough, come back with scars instead of stitches. The kind that never tear again. Reese came hard, loud, and blind with fury. He didn't send scouts this time. No traps, no whispers. Just thunder. 6 engines roaring down the desert stretch like they were chasing the devil himself. He wasn't after justice. He wasn't even after revenge. He just wanted to kill the ghost that made him look weak. The desert welcomed us back like it had been waiting. Same sand, same wind, same scent of heat and memory. The place where they buried me. The place where the club died and didn't even notice. I stood there with Nero at my side, Colt 100 yards back in the rocks, watching with steady hands and loaded steel. But this wasn't about guns. This was about reckoning. Reese stepped off his bike like he owned the earth. Black boots, red eyes, leather jacket still dripping ego. "No mask this time," he sneered. "That your big move?" I didn't answer, just stood still. Nero sat beside me, unmoving, eyes locked on Reese, like he knew this was the final play. "You should have stayed dead," Reese spat. "Would have been cleaner." "You made me this way," I said quietly. "You just didn't think I'd survive long enough to say thank you." He laughed. The others around him shifted. They weren't laughing, not anymore. They had seen the fallout, the silence, the brothers who vanished one by one. And now they saw me, standing upright, calm, not afraid. Reese drew first, a silver pistol raised to chest height, one hand steady, the other shaking just enough for Nero to notice. He fired. I moved. The bullet grazed past me, close enough to kiss, but not enough to matter. Then Nero moved. He didn't bark, didn't growl. He launched, black lightning across the sand, jaws wide, precision in every muscle. He didn't go for the kill. He went for the gun. One strike, one crunch. Reese's wrist snapped on impact, and the pistol dropped like dead weight. Reese screamed. I closed the distance. One punch to the jaw. Not enough to drop him, just enough to remind him I'd been training too. He fell to one knee, blood running from his mouth, hand cradling what used to be his weapon. "You wanted a final ride," I said, "so I brought you back to where you left me." He looked up at me. No rage now, just fear. The kind that comes when a man realizes no one is standing behind him anymore. I could have ended him right there. No one would have stopped me. But I didn't. I called Nero back. I turned my back to Reese. "You don't get a grave," I said. "You get to ride into the nothing you created." And then I walked away. Not because I was weak, but because ghosts don't bury the dead. They leave them to live with what they've done. Reese's breath came in short, shallow gasps. The sand clung to his skin, his mouth dry, his hands trembling beneath the weight of it. He was buried up to his chest now, arms pinned, legs locked in the same desert that once tried to keep me, the same ground he chose for my grave. Only now, it was his turn to taste the silence. I stood over him, the shovel resting against my shoulder, the handle warm from the sun. Nero sat beside me, still and watching, head tilted just enough to show he understood exactly what this was. Reese tried to laugh, but it came out cracked. "You think this makes you different?" he croaked. "You think you're better?" I knelt down so he could see my eyes, real close. "No," I said. "I know I'm different, because I'm walking away." He looked confused. Rage and fear fighting for space behind his bloodshot eyes. "You're not going to finish it?" "The desert doesn't forget," I said, "and neither do I. But I don't need to carry you with me." He struggled, chest rising, face flushing. "You'll never be free of me." "That's the part you still don't get," I said. "I already am." I dropped something in front of him. Not a knife, not a bullet, a single matchstick. The same kind I'd left behind at every stop. It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder that I was still breathing, and he'd have to live with that. Then I stood, turned my back, and whistled once. Nero rose instantly, tail low, ears still alert, and padded up beside me without hesitation. No leash, no command, just trust. As we walked away, I didn't look back, not even once. Let him scream. Let him dig. Let the sun decide how long he lasted out there. Either he'd claw his way out like I did, or he'd learn what silence really meant. But for me, it was over. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need blood. I had Nero. I had breath in my lungs and fire in my bones. And for the first time in years, I wasn't riding for anyone else. No patch, no orders, no club, just the road, just freedom. We passed the ridge where they left me once. The wind was strong up there, stronger than I remembered. It wrapped around us like a memory that no longer hurt. The desert didn't take me. It gave me back to myself, and the dog they all forgot, the one they left behind. He never let me die. He dug me out. And now, we ride, silent, free, unburied.